Hey everyone, it's me, Janell Rhiannon, the author of Homeric Chronicles, Song of Sacrifice, and Rise of Princes. Book 3 right now I'm working on, Rage of Queens, and I'm also the podcaster for Greek Mythology Retold. So if you're seeing this, you're basically probably someone who likes retellings, or you like the Trojan War specifically, and retellings about the Trojan War. And I've been researching quite a bit to write this book. I read the Iliad, the Odyssey, different translations of both. And I have the Cypria. I read the Greek plays. I also read modern scholars' interpretations and examinations of fragments and plays, and just examining the characters of Greek mythology. And you know what I find fascinating about Greek mythology is that these characters there's a mythological canon with these characters. So there's sort of this line that you sort of have to follow, but then there are these variants that it could be this, it could be that. And so as a writer, that's kind of the fun part, is I get to make decisions about when I come across conflicting historical, and I say historical because it's mythological, but the canon makes it historical, if that makes sense. So, you know, there's sort of an acceptability and there's an understanding that characters take a certain path. And so if you deviate from that, you make people who love the mythology raise an eyebrow, like, what is she doing? So anyway, yeah, that is, I forgot what I was talking about because I'm kind of nervous being on camera. I don't like it. I'm making myself do it. Oh. All right. So back to what I'm doing. I do a lot. I take a lot of things into consideration, and I examine a lot of things. I read a lot of things. I try to share those. If you go over to my YouTube, I try to put in the links of the sources that I come across. One of my favorite ones right now is Dr. Casey de Hackney, and she's written several articles on the multiformity text that involves the Trojan War telling, and she makes a clear case and a point that Homer is just amalgamating as much of the mythology as he can, and that became his story. That became known as the Homeric tale of what most of us are familiar with. But it doesn't mean that other singers weren't singing and telling other stories, storytellers weren't telling other versions or about these characters. So when we get those in fragments, and that kind of comes together, and we hobble, if you will, the story of the Trojan War. Anyway, that fascinates me. So anyway, Dr. Casey de Hackney's work is something I'm particularly fond of, and I'm hoping to be able to do an interview with Ryan Stitt and his podcast about that. Anyway, so back to what I'm trying to do. I don't have a fancy name for what I'm trying to do. I just want to get on here and I just want to share with you COVID hair, kind of whatever. And I was looking like, oh my gosh, my hair's all over the place, whatever. My dogs don't care, my cats don't care, and I don't know, they might pop up somewhere in here, they're around. Anyway, I just want to share with you the research that I'm doing and some of the conclusions I'm coming to as I'm writing this series. The first person right now that I want to talk about is Hecuba, and she is the Queen of Troy. She is the second wife to Priam. We don't know a lot about his first wife, but she is the second wife, and she is the mother of 19 of his children. We're told in Homer via Priam that he had 50 children. He had 50 sons anyway. That's not including daughters, so that's more than 50, right? It's just 50 sons. But 19 of the children that he mentions are from the same woman. That's because the rest of the kids are coming from various other wives, concubines, throughout the Troad. Anyway, Hecuba is the queen that we know about. She's pretty pivotal because the prophecy that sort of sets in motion the Trojan War is something she literally gives birth to. Yet we don't see her represented in a very big way in the Iliad. And we don't see her represented in a really big way in motion pictures either. A lot of people like the movie Troy with Brad Pitt in 2004. And you know what? It's visually a very stunning movie, and I like it for that. However, for me, leaving the gods out, and the movie was so short, I just feel like it would be trying to stick Game of Thrones into like a trilogy, which would be impossible. So I feel like that's kind of where the movie Troy sits for me. There's so many things that are left out, and they amalgamate certain characters into one character, and I don't know. Like Briseis, for example, she's sort of Briseis and Chryseis slash Astynomé slash, yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, but the point is, Hecuba's not even a character in that movie. Priam figures very, Peter O'Toole, like you can't miss him on screen. But where's the wife? Where's the mother? Where's Hecuba? We don't see her. In Troy Fall of a City, we see her, she's played by Frances O'Connor, and I feel like that was really well cast. I really liked her as Hecuba, because she's sort of, and the older woman, middle age, like me, and she's still raising kids. She's very active, an active mother. So anyway, we have that. And so let's just look at that for a second. So she is Priam's second wife and the mother of the Prince of Troy, Hector. So the son who is the crown prince is Hector. We see a lot of things about Hector, and he's this amazing fighter. He's the defender of the citadel. He is the protector of the city, the prince of the city. And so he has a really, in the Iliad, he has, I think, probably a really good relationship with his mother. And I conclude that from where we get to the end. So I'll get there. And then we have Paris. Paris is the complicated son. Paris is the baby that she was carrying when she received the prophecy that if this child was born, he would mean the death or the doom of Troy. So she had this vision that she basically gave birth to a burning log, and then it was interpreted to mean it was a bad omen for this child and for the city. And that's why Priam and she had to make that really painful decision to set the baby out for exposure. And when I look at Hecuba, I think about that as a mother. So you have this prophecy that says that the child that you're carrying and you're going to give birth to is going to destroy the city that you live in. Ugh, what do you do with that? Like, that's your baby. I think that as a mother, that would be really difficult, and even as a father. Now a king is a king. As a king and queen, you sort of have a different responsibility to the people that you're governing over. And I think that as Hecuba, as the mother, and it's supposedly her second child, I just feel that she would have been very reluctant to let this child go. And even if she knew she had to let this child go, the fact that somebody's got to put their foot down and make it happen. And so Priam is the one that takes this child away from her and gives it to the shepherd and says, Aglaus, take this baby out and make sure that it dies. I feel like a couple of things. Number one, Hector's going to be old enough probably to remember something bad happened. And he's going to grow up with a mother who is burdened by that kind of grief. So Hector's experience with and relationship with his mother, I don't think it can help but revolve around that in some way. I think also that that's going to affect Hecuba's relationship with Priam. And that's where I feel that Troy Fall of a City kind of had an opportunity to take it in a certain way, and then they didn't. They really made in that that show, they really made it that Priam was more upset about the, what happened to Paris, that they had to give him away, or not give him away, but expose him out there to die than she did. And I felt like she was the one more or less consoling him. I just really feel it should be humanistically the other way around. There's something different as the mother who gives birth to a child. So as a writer, that's the vein that I took. So those are things to consider when you think about Hector perhaps being a real person, or Hecuba or Priam, if they were real human beings. And I sort of go with Barry Strauss's analysis, where he says that even in oral tradition, if you want to think about something, an oral tradition that's based on something, and what's easier to remember in an oral history that becomes mythology than names. So surely the names existed at one point were attached to real people, and over the course of time, what they did and etc. was embellished, or maybe pieces of their story are forgotten. So I try to look at the characters humanistically like that. And as humans, we have a whole wide range of things that we experience and emotions that we have. And not every person's going to feel the same way about a specific kind of event, but we are certainly free to interpret that. So I take Hecuba and her relationship with Priam, and I see there was probably a really positive relationship and good. And that after this event with Paris, where they had to take their second son and expose him to the elements to die, I feel like that probably fractured the relationship a little bit. I think that's probably a realistic idea that could face any married couple, right? Losing a child could create a tremendous amount of grief that a couple may or may not be able to work through. Now, in the ancient world, she's not able to just like go away. She has to stay immersed in that grief and in that loss and in the place. She didn't have a choice but to stay in the palace where her son has been literally ripped from her breast. So that's the Hecuba that I sort of look for and see. And now it makes sense to me, because when I get to the end of the Iliad, and this is why it's sad that Troy Fell of a City didn't include this scene, and why it's sad that the movie Troy didn't include it. In my books, however, I do include it, because I feel like it's pivotal to who she is as a character, her relationship to the city of Troy, her relationship to her children, and her relationship to her husband, Priam. All right, so she has this impossible choice with Paris, and she I think, has a close relationship with Hector, because in the end of the Iliad, when Hector has to face Achilles, what's happened is that I say Greeks, I know it's the Achaeans and Danaans, and I've been sort of criticized about that, but people expect the word Greek and the word Trojan, so they expect Greeks versus Trojans. So I'm not trying to give people a history lesson when they're reading the novels. I just want them to enjoy the story. So I say Greeks. And so when the Greeks and the Trojans are fighting, the Trojans had pressed into the Greek camp at the beach. It was basically a rout. The gods were involved on both sides, creating a bunch of havoc. And anyway, so Hector takes all the Trojans and their allies back to the city, and they're all running into the city. And then as he's doing that, then he's sort of marshaling everybody, and he's outside the city gates still. And his father sees in the Iliad, his father sees something out in the distance, and he realizes it's Achilles coming back, because Apollo had tricked Achilles and got him to run off in the other direction and, chase the red herring, so to speak, right? Or chase the rabbit. And then Apollo's like, haha, I tricked you, and all the Trojans are back inside the city, and Achilles is all angry. And this is after Patroclus has died, obviously. So, you see the scene is that Achilles is running back, and Priam and Hecuba are up on the ramparts of the city, and they realize that Achilles is coming. They shout down to their son, you know, like Hector, you know, get back, get in the gate because Achilles is coming, and fight him from inside the gate. Like, let's, you know, don't go out there. Everybody knew that at this point, if Hector had to face Achilles, he was going to die. So I'm getting to the Hecuba part. So Priam does this dad thing, and he's, you know, says all these things, and then Hecuba's scene is so personal. She is in tears, and she wants so badly for her son to be safe. And she, in front of all of the nobles and whoever else is out on the ramparts, she doesn't even care. She just rips open the front of her chiton and exposes her chest, and she says, "Look at my breast. Look at, I nursed you. Like, if you ever loved me, if you just, you know, like, don't fight Achilles, like." By my breast, by right of my mother, of being your mother, I have the right to demand, to ask that you, the defender of the city, the warrior that we most highly praise, to come back in the city. Because she, at that moment, she's looking at Hector as her son. And if she didn't have a strong connection to him, and their relationship wasn't bonded, I don't think that she would have done that. I mean, it's, number one, is desperate. Number two, it's humiliating. And she didn't care. She just wanted her son back. And she knew he was going to die. So she has to watch as Hector fights Achilles, and know in her heart and in her soul, with every fiber of her being, in her bones, she knows that her son is going to die right before her eyes. And I don't know, as a mother or even as a parent, what that would be like to have to experience that. And to hear, you know, Achilles saying the things that he's saying, that he's, you know, going to let Hector's body be torn apart by the dogs back at the Greek ships. And she has to just know that. And then she has to watch while her son dies. And then she has to watch while Achilles, in his grief and rage, and basically dishonorable behavior, she has to watch while he cuts Hector's tendons in the back of his ankle, and string the leather and put him into the chariot and just drag him away. And he drags around the city, and just imagine her son, just, I can't, you know, his head bobbing in the ground. And yeah, I think that would be really hard to watch. And so she's up on the rampart, and she rips out her hair, and she cries, and she screams, because there's nothing she could do about it. She can't save her son. And I think that really speaks to, yes, there are elements of that's typical behavior in Bronze Age literature that we see in Bronze Age cultures, to, you know, put ash on their head and rip out their hair. But still, the idea of it, they would still be human beings. And I can't imagine, you know, just I can imagine it. I just don't want to imagine it. But yeah, you know, just pulling out your hair by the root, just bloodying your head in your grief. So that's really Hecuba. She, I think she had a really solid relationship with Hector, and as the second wife, and going back to her relationship with Priam, she had to, as the primary wife, she had to, you know, stand by, watch while her husband had basically a harem, had as many kids with other women that he had with her, which is very different from the Greek men. So after the Trojan War, obviously the Greek men are going to take back concubines and women but I just can't, they don't have harems. So maybe it was normal, maybe it didn't bother, but I feel that on some level, there would have to, you have to give up a little bit of a piece of maybe who you are, because you just know that maybe that just has to happen. So I feel that would affect the relationship that you have with your husband. So she was politically bonded and wanted the defense of Troy. She didn't want anything to happen to the Trojan civilization. She loved the city of Troy, and she gave birth to 19 princes and princesses of Troy, and she had to watch many of them die at the hands of Achilles. I feel like that makes Hecuba a sad and stoic woman, and a strong woman too, because she had to endure all that, I had a couple of things I wanted to read to you. And I think her relationship, going back to her relationship with Paris. So in the end of all things, she has to contemplate, did she make the right decision? Was her grief and sadness, was it worth it? Because in the end, Priam says it isn't. After Hector dies, he tells all his remaining sons, I wish all of you had died instead of Hector. If I could have Hector alive today, right now in this moment, I wish that all of you had died instead, because you guys are all worthless. And he literally goes into a tirade and tells them some stuff. And I think that Hecuba, originally they welcome Paris back with open arms, and Hecuba specifically would have, I think, some feelings about that. But as Paris starts making certain decisions, like when he goes to, because he doesn't start out with Helen. So he comes back to Troy, and he's not with Helen at this point. Actually, Priam is the one who sends him on a mission to go and get back Hesione, who is his sister from the first Trojan War. So he sends him off on a mission, which is unsuccessful, and on the way home is when he gets to Sparta. But all this is being machinated by Aphrodite. And another layer on top of that is all being machinated by Zeus, basically. So anyway, I had a scene where Hecuba is not very accepting of of Helen of Troy, and this is where Paris wants to marry Helen. So it sort of looks at the complicated nature of Hecuba's relationship with Paris. So it's out of this book right here. She says, Hecuba looked into her son's dark eyes, and she saw his determination and his sadness. What troubles you, Paris? You deny your blessing of my marriage to Helen. She stiffens, pulling her hand from his. Men often ask for advice, refusing to listen once it's given. Marrying Helen will only inflame the hatred of the Greeks. Is it not a disrespect to keep her only as concubine? Does she not deserve better? Did Hesione deserve less? I have only taken what the Greeks once took from us. But your father didn't send an army to retrieve her. He was satisfied in his youth and inexperience to let his sister go. Menelaus is no such youth. He is a king, cuckolded before the world. And his brother, Agamemnon, is a king to rival Priam. Mycenae and Sparta are worthy adversaries combined. Do not believe the lies soldiers tell to one another around campfires at night. No Trojan is safe, ever will be safe, as long as Helen remains behind these walls. Paris scanned the inner courtyard wall, the high gate reinforced with iron, the penetrating blue of the sky. I can't give her back. Then you will fight with Menelaus sooner or later, and he will kill you, Paris. My love for you can't spare. My love for you can't spare you that. I know I must face Menelaus someday. And when that day arrives, I will be ready and I will be victorious. If you marry his wife, his need for vengeance will increase, giving him advantage. You have gleaned nothing from men's souls. Vengeance is a thirst that can never be fully quenched. I can see there is no way to earn your blessing, mother. He leaned to kiss her cheek. I will marry her with or without it. Hecuba watched her son pass through the gate and from her view before she let her tears fall. The gods have their hands in this misery. Paris brought the Western invaders on his heels years ago when the skies were clear and blue. Now the storm clouds gather as Paris passes. Hecuba shivered, dust and gold flashing before her waking eyes. What will become of us if we can't keep Troilus safe? If Hector can't stop Achilles, we will all perish. So that was just a little scene between Paris and Hecuba. I think they have a complicated relationship. She loves Paris, of course it's her son, but I think she's torn because he was supposed to die, and his death meant that what was happening right in front of them right now, what was happening on the beach, on the plane, would not be happening had he died when he was an infant, as was supposed to. But you know how fate is. And then I also wanted to share the last thing. I'm reading Caroline Alexander's translation of the Iliad, which I love. I've read several translations, and just so you, I love this. And you can just see, I write all over this book, all over it. It's all stuck, but I make notes everywhere. I love it. Anyway, the scene where Hecuba is up on the rampart, she says, I should have marked it up. Oh, down at the bottom. So I'm in book 22 and I'm about line 78 or so. Hecuba says, now in turn his mother wailed, raining tears and loosening her robe. With a hand she exposed her breast, and raining tears addressed him with winged words. Hector, my child, be moved by this and have pity on me. If ever I used to give you my breast to soothe you, remember those times, my dear child. Defend yourself against this deadly man from inside the walls. Don't stand as champion against him, my stubborn one. If he cuts you down, I will surely never mourn you on your deathbed, dear budding branch whom I bore, nor will your worthy wife, but a long way from us, by the ships of the Achaeans, the running dogs will eat you. So both she and Priam, address him, but I feel like what she did was so personal, and that speaks to the kind of mother that she was and the kind of grief that she had as the mother of all these Trojan princes, and specifically Hector in general, and then that torn feeling that she must have of missing Paris and missing that child, and then having that child returned only for the prophecy to be proven true as the years go by, and that knowing there's nothing they can do about it. So that is my discussion of Queen Hecuba. And if you want to hear more, I have a detailed podcast on Greek mythology retold. And the podcast is about Hecuba and Leda. I put them together because they are sort of the matriarch queens of the Trojans and the Greeks, right? And also I don't have the Song of Sacrifice, it's blue, but this is the second book in my Homeric series. You can get these on Amazon. They're exclusive on Amazon, so you can have paperback, which actually is it's really pretty, the paperback is. Where's one of the pages? And Nadej Richards did this, and it's just really pretty. I like the paperback, and it feels really soft velvety butter on the cover. So I kind of like that one. But anyway, if you want to find out more about how I've interpreted the characters, read the books. If you want to just check out a podcast, if that's your jam, I have that, Greek Mythology Retold. So I'm on all the platforms, and like anything that you like and check it out. So that's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye.